Okay, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us again at the Scrutiny Committee 1 meeting to discuss emotional well-being and mental health. We're now going to go to Councillor Melanie Evans, who has a question on the framework and how it will be reviewed. Councillor Evans?
Yep, thank you very much there, Chair. I noted this was quite back early on in the report in page 14 that the review of this framework was scheduled to take place during late 22. I wondered if you can tell me what were the outcomes of that review and when did the review actually take place? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Evans. Do we know what the outcomes of the review and how it was amended at all, Lindsay? Or Joe, are you still with us? I wouldn't be surprised if you're going for lunch, to be honest with you.
Apologies, Joe, about to go to another meeting for one.
Okay, well, perhaps we can find out for Councillor Evans what the results were of that review of the framework. Perhaps we can write to the Welsh Government, or we can certainly find out that answer for you, Councillor Evans, and even ask Joe to respond on our behalf. So apologies, we can't provide you with an answer now, but we'll certainly facilitate that for you.
Thank you.
We're now going to, I believe we're going to Councillor Amanda Williams again now on homeschooling. I think you had a question on that. Councillor Amanda Williams, are you with us? Okay, in the meantime, while Councillor Williams finds her microphone, we'll go to Councillor Joanna Llewellyn-Hopkins to discuss RSE. Unless everyone's left us. We did say one o'clock.
I'm here, Chair.
Okay. Thank
2
goodness for that.
seconds, I'm just getting my question. Hang on a sec. Right, I can't actually find my question, but I do know what it was. So, with regards to the new RSE curriculum, what are we doing to ensure the parents are fully aware of exactly what the children are going to be taught? I've been approached by several parents and had several horrific things suggested to me. Why are you going to teach our children about masturbation when they're 3? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Now, I'm aware that this is not the case because I've read the stuff. What are we going to do to make sure that we advise the parents and they don't pick up stuff on social media and run with that, please?
Okay, Lindsay would like to take this.
Thanks, Chair. It's another really important point. Again, as you probably be aware, all people are in this meeting. This has been an item of significant discussion over the last year or so, and we've worked very closely with Welsh Government through the Associate Directors of Education Wales and with schools on this. Now, I recall, and head teachers will correct me on this if I'm wrong, about 6 months ago, we issued a sort of summary letter to schools as basically developed by Welsh Government as a summary for schools and communities on this issue. One of the things we can certainly do is send out a refresher communication on this, because again, we still continue to receive queries and communication on this issue. I know Sue Roberts, Chair, is the school support officer who deals with this. Through you, Chair, whether or not we can get any update from Welsh Government through Sue with regard to if they're going to produce another communication, because obviously we do want to be in line with Welsh Government thinking.
Sure, thanks very much, Lindsay. Sue? I think Sue may have gone as well. So we'll perhaps seek further clarification then, Lindsay, on that particular point. You'd like to come in again? Yeah.
Apologies, Chair. Just one thing. Can I just confirm, just easy to make sure we can move this on quickly? Head teachers present, if you remember that the note we sent out, if we can discuss this with Sue and obviously update it as required, and we'll send another note out that we can share with parents. So head teacher colleagues, you all content with that?
Yes, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. It'd just be easier to move it on quickly then.
Yep, great. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. We are now going, I think, Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins, you had a number of other questions which we can take now before we go back to Councillor Williams with her question on homeschooling. I believe you wanted to raise a question on page 25 regarding mental health issues, followed by young people presenting to independent counselling services, and then a question on the curriculum for Wales. So perhaps we can take those three questions from you. Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins, are you there?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Right, my first point is the figures presented as to how many children are seeking counselling at the moment. If you just bear with me a second, I've got the figures written down. It's 1 in 10 children between 5 and 16 have a mental health problem. My question is, how are we ensuring as a school, that we've got suitably qualified personnel to deal with this, please?
Okay, thanks very much. Is that one for the local authority, Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. I think where it's going to be difficult going forward on this, if Joe is not here, Catherine will obviously address it from the local authority and education psychologist perspective, but from a CAMS perspective, obviously this is a slightly different service. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, we can seek clarification from a CAMS perspective and write to Joe for clarification. But in the meantime, we'll pass over to Catherine for any supplementary remarks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in terms of those figures, we're looking at the whole spectrum of obviously mental health and well-being. And I think we've always been very clear in our schools and in the local authority, and also in Welsh Government, when we've presented to the Children's Committee and they were producing documentation around mental health, is that it's always around a graduated response. So we are talking high numbers, but we're also talking about schools having a robust internal response, and also with support from the local authority. So if we're talking about our ELSAs, just about all of our schools, maybe one or two where ELSAs have moved on, and we're continually training 3 cohorts a year. So we have staff already, the capacity within schools who are supporting that sort of low level, those sort of concerns. We've linked with Joe Bendon and the Shine project to try and make sure that there isn't any overlap. Schools have school counsellors, the local authority have counselling services put in. We provide supervision for our ELSAs, but alongside that, our teams actually go in and support sort of some of the more complex needs, and then link with CAMS. So I think it's around a graduated response and a robust response. So you have schools' internal processes, wellbeing officers, family engagement, school counselling. Then you have your ELSAs, the Shine project, before you actually moving on into, the higher tiers in terms of sort of CAMS support. So, and obviously the great work from, I'm not sure if Mark is still on the line, but obviously, the early help teams and the school counselling services. So I think one of the key kind of messages from lots of the meetings that I've attended with the whole school approach, with Joe, with Rebecca, with the sort of Shine project, is to make sure that we bring all these services sort of together, because so much good work is going on, but it often feels like we don't know what else is going on alongside ours. So one of the beauties, I think, of the whole school approach has been lots of multidisciplinary meetings where we're saying, oh, wow, healthy schools, the school nursing, look what schools already have, and how we've been able to sort of start linking some of those services together.
Thanks very much, Catherine. We've got Christina now, who's CAMS senior nurse, I understand. Christina?
Yes, thanks very much. It was just sort of building on what Catherine's been speaking about with our Shine service. They are actually the CAMS in reach, sort of up and running with Welsh Government, the sort of the forward planning from Welsh Government. So the CAMS in reach is the Shine team. And at the moment, I think we're in the last sort of phase with Joe Bendon in implementing emotional wellbeing practitioners and registered nurses within every school, so that's primary and secondary across the board. They will take on a stepped care approach with regards to the mental health and wellbeing of staff and primary school age and secondary school age children. And what they provide in the schools is consultation to staff members, staff wellbeing, one-to-one with the children, parent drop-ins, staff wellbeing drop-ins. So there's a lot of input going into schools from the Shine in, well, the CAMS InReach service at the moment. And that deems sort of CAMS input into the schools continuously with regards to access to them, a trusted adult. And then, of course, there's a stepped care approach then. So if there are children and young people that go through the consultation process, go through the one-to-one or the group or the whole class or the whole school, they will then deem, if they deem then to need a mental health assessment, we've got a stepped approach into our CAM service with regards to that as well. So, you know, we're a very small team. There is only sort of 13 practitioners and 3 team leads right across CTM. But I think, you know, I think they're trying to meet the needs of the individual schools going forward with regards to mental health and emotional well-being.
Great, thank you very much, Christina. Can I ask members and invitees now to make their responses as succinct as possible, because I'm conscious of the fact that the corporate director, the cabinet member and our head teachers need to leave for a school budget forum meeting shortly. So I'll continue with Councillor Joanna Lorraine Hopkins on her other questions which she has regarding independent counselling services and the curriculum for Wales, and then I'll go to Councillor Williams on homeschooling.
Thank you, Chair. On page 28 of the report is a figure of 11,500 children said to be seeking counselling each year in Wales. Personally, I would suggest this is the tip of the iceberg. So what are we doing to identify those that have not come forward yet? And my second question, I'll just ask it now. With regards to the curriculum in Wales, how are we ensuring that pupils will have the correct knowledge to compete for places in English universities? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's in a position to answer that question? Lindsay, try his best.
The second question, certainly Sue would be able to help out here because she deals with, Sue Roberts, apologies, deals with HE. On the first bit, I tend to agree with you, Councillor. I think that is a small number. Certainly from what I hear from schools, it seems to be significant. What are we doing to provide access to these services? Again, it goes back to the issue we mentioned earlier, is first of all, identification at an early stage within schools. Secondly, is working very closely with our education psychology service, as Kath has identified, and other counselling facilities within schools. I can see Mark Lewis is with us with his service. And then making sure that we broker the correct service and make sure that the correct resources are in place at a very quick, within a quick timescale. So I suppose it goes back to the initial idea of us all working together to identify the need very quickly and put the relevant services in place quickly through partnership working. But again, I think it is a challenge because, again, it is a requirement to provide ready support for these learners. And clearly there is pressure on all the services to provide that service. So again, to answer the question quickly, first of all, in the first part, yes, I think that there is a greater number than that. And secondly, through you, Chair, if Sue is here, she can certainly pick up the issue with HE.
Thank you, Lindsay. I think Sue may have left the meeting unless I'm otherwise mistaken, but I'm sure she can provide any supplementary comments in writing if necessary. But I can see Marcus raise his hand to make any comments.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I think we need to be clear about school-based counselling and what requires that level of intervention, because it's a therapeutic intervention. So absolutely, there are a range of the wider early help offer. We've got, for example, emotional wellbeing workers supporting within primary schools. There's a sort of a myriad of arrangements in place, but I think it's being clear how we target those resources, into those right areas. So if we look at waiting lists, are there waiting lists for school-based counselling services? The answer is yes. But actually, we've got to get better at triaging those, because actually, when you dig into some of those waiting lists, and they're not significant, and I'm happy to share those with the committee, lots of those don't end up requiring maybe a counselling type of intervention. So we talked about CAMS, and I'm not best placed to talk about child adolescent mental health services. But if you look at the range of services in place, from emotional wellbeing workers to school-based counsellors to community counsellors to play therapists, and I'm sure Kath can list other professionals within her service areas. For me, and this is only a personal view, it's how we actually triage, for want of a better word, those young people to those services in a timely way. So there's additionality, although the report, which the committee have looked at, is only a snapshot, isn't it, in terms of school-based counselling. There's additional money being put into school-based counselling services, but I think we've got to be very clear when we're looking at that sort of pyramid of need, really, how we better triage them in a more, I say them, children they are, pupils, in a more timely manner. So share that data with colleagues, but I think it's there's a wider point. I think sometimes everyone says, well, Mark or Helen need counselling, and that's not always the case, is it? There's a variety of other interventions and support, some of them much lower level in terms of a buddy system or something else that might be far more appropriate. So I think there isn't a one size fits all, I think, is what I'm saying in a clumsy way, Chair.
Great, thank you, Mark. Back to you, Johanna Hopkins.
It was just the last part of my question regarding the curriculum for Wales.
Yeah, that's correct.
How are we ensuring the pupils that if we're allowing schools to generate their own curriculums, how are we going to make sure that our pupils have the correct knowledge to compete for places in the English university system, please?
Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, with the Curriculum for Wales aspect, head teacher president will be aware of the fact they work very closely with their improvement partner and with the school support team to make sure that the curriculum offer is relevant. And that extends to all areas of the curriculum, but obviously this key area. So we test that to make sure the best practice is shared across our schools and across the region. Also, we draw upon best practices identified by Estyn and by Welsh Government, with regard to making sure that there's appropriate provision to access all types of HE facilities. Within Bridgend, for example, we have a flourishing SERA network activity that my colleague Sue Roberts is in charge of. She works very closely with schools. Significant numbers of learners from our schools, I'm pleased to say, access this programme, especially for the more able and talented learners within our schools. But also we try our very best to make sure that all pathways are available to our learners, so whether they be for higher education, whether they be for vocational courses, or proceeding into the FE sector from our school, or directly into employment. Obviously, we value all those pathways equally. But again, to the HE question, obviously we need to make sure that all HE opportunities within Wales and England are available to our learners.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. I'm going to have to make progress now because I know colleagues have to leave us. So perhaps I can move now to Councillor Amanda Williams, who would like to raise questions on homeschooling, the timing of the school day and the school environment. So over to you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much. I'll try and be quick. Going on from the Curriculum for Wales, it ties in as well with the homeschooling. Firstly, what are we doing to make sure that homeschooling is following this new Curriculum for Wales? But my original question on homeschooling and well-being is, parents have the right to homeschool their children, but it's something we've seen where I'm a governor in a comprehensive school, is that quite often when it comes up to GCSE or A-level time, they're opting to bring those children back into the school setting for either the last year or the 2 years for their GCSEs. And they need a lot of support to get them ready for the exams they're finding. So the school are then spending a lot of time supporting those children into getting them into the ready for GCSEs and A-levels. So not only does it impact on the overall results, but it impacts on them and the amount of support staff are given. So I wondered if other colleagues had the same had identified the same problems and how they manage the well-being of those who opt to come back in to school from a homeschooling perspective, please.
Thanks very much, Councillor Williams. Who would like to take that? Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. I can certainly offer up the local authority position. Interestingly, colleagues, and it's a piece of document, it's a piece of guidance that I've not had time to digest yet. I think it was published either at the start of this week or last week. The Welsh Government has recently published an elective home education guidance that sets out a lot of the requirements with regard to elective home education and how the interface with local authorities and parents in this area work. Within the local authority, I'm sure colleagues, elected members will be aware, we've invested heavily over the last 3 years in the education engagement team. Colleagues who work in schools will be aware of Gail Biggs, who does a sterling job in working with schools and parents who decide to electively home educate their learners to provide access and broker a number of opportunities for these learners. I think Councillor Williams raises an important point. Again, the challenges sometimes around examination time and qualifications and how we do that. Hopefully, and again, I can't comment because I haven't read the guidance extensively because it's literally just been published, but I'm hoping that will provide further guidance on that. I would certainly, once I have a chance to digest it and seek advice from officers on that, Chair, I'm more than happy coming back to the Council with a summary on that, if that's okay.
That's great. Thank you very much, Lindsay. You're content with that, Councillor Williams?
Yes, I am, because when you're homeschooled, you won't be interacting with lots of other children. So it's sometimes a shock to be then suddenly in a class of 20, 30 children and they find it difficult. So yeah, I welcome that.
That's great. Thank you very much. Councillor Evans, I know you have a series of questions now at the tail end of the report with regards to the third sector, Together for Children and Young People, the working relationship between education and social services, as well as questions on Annex 1 and Annex 2. So over to you.
Well, firstly, mine was about the school environment, because I don't think we've completed this yet, have we, Alex?
We're more than welcome to cover everything off that we discussed in our pre-meeting. However, we won't have any officers or head teachers there. So
okay.
It's entirely up to you what you choose to raise with officers today.
So I'm wondering whether basically the school environment, I can just ask a couple of questions on that one. I mean, thank you. The school's physical environment, it mentions in the report, classrooms, outdoor spaces and dining, etc., all contribute to a learner's sense of well-being. They also contribute to the well-being of adults who work in and those who are regular visitors to the school. It can contribute to children's behaviour and the school's ability to regulate that behaviour. And I'm well adversed in the fact that well-being supports attainment. I wonder if you can answer then, over a vast estate of schools in Bridgend, are you satisfied that the physical environment of all schools actually contributes to positive outcomes of well-being for all who use it? Also, are you comfortable that every school in Bridgend is embodied and fit for the 21st century, or as it's now known as sustainable communities for learning? And finally, in the report, it mentions the local authority and FE institutions are also encouraged to integrate appropriate design measures in order to make a positive impact on well-being. Therefore, are you comfortable and satisfied that the designs of schools, including their drop-off zones, are contributing to positive outcomes of well-being? And how will you ensure that all school environments will contribute to a positive outcome of well-being? That's my first question. Thank you, or many.
Thank you very much. Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Evans. I'll give it a go. So again, if I miss any, please let me know. So first of all, with regard to the comment around how do physical environments in schools help with children and staff well-being, I think that's a well-made point. Certainly some of the efforts I've seen by all of our schools in producing effective places, not just for learners, but for staff as well within their environments, has been really impressive, actually, and regardless of whether you're in a new school or an older school within Bridgend. I've seen some excellent ideas with regard to outdoor learning that head teachers have put in place for learners in some of our older schools. And similarly, for some of the staff areas I've seen with regard to aiding their work practices in school, and also areas for relaxation in their break time. So again, I'd certainly like to applaud head teachers for the efforts they put into that. With regard to what are we doing across the estate to make sure there's equity in all of those areas, undeniably we have schools that are in different conditions. We carry out a condition survey on a regular basis through our corporate landlord department, and we can see that some schools are in better condition than others, and we fully recognise that. And through a rolling programme of capital development and improvement, obviously we take it upon ourselves to make sure the schools, first of all, are safe, and secondly, they meet all the learning requirements of the 21st century. But again, it is a rolling programme, and we can't achieve that overnight, clearly. The other issue I think is important as well is when we look at our different estate, we see some older schools who really work hard to squeeze value out of the estate that they work with. So a key requirement within Curriculum for Wales is the regard to outdoor learning, with regard to making best use of their school ground. And I'd be more than happy to arrange visits to any of our schools, especially our older schools, on how head teachers have really looked at modernising their sort of quite old environments. And I can see Carmen from St Robert's, who's online at the moment, who's done a remarkable job in a very confined school there, working with quite challenging grounds to make it a very rich learning environment. So through you, Chair, I'd certainly make that offer. The other thing which we look at is gauging as well is what do Estin say? They're the regulators. We take obviously a view on what they feed back to us after every school inspection. It's seldom actually that we get criticised in Bridgend for school buildings and their grounds, and that's because of the really diligent way the head teachers manage them and the support they get from corporate landlord. So again, that's very positive. Moving forward then, obviously we've got a suite of new bills that we are proposing within Band B of the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. When we build new schools, obviously we are subject to various building bulletins from Welsh Government. We can't just build a school to all the things we'd like to put into it. Obviously we're confined by the cost of building it and also what's required by Welsh Government. But certainly from a local authority point of view, we make sure that we are mindful of all the requirements, including BREEAM and the requirements of Welsh Government learning. The last point with fit for purpose, again, members on this call will be aware of some of the challenges we face with some of our schools with regard to drop-offs. Clearly, we are subject to advice and direction from the Health and Safety Executive. It's a statutory duty on the local authority to make sure that we follow that advice, and then we work very closely with the communities then with regard to any additional impact on road traffic outside those schools. And again, that's an ongoing activity that a lot of ward members on this call are aware of. I think I've covered everything, Chair, but I'm more than happy to go back on any element I haven't.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer, Lindsay. Councillor Evans?
That's fine. That's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams would like to raise something on the school environment as well, I believe.
Yes, thanks very much. There's two quick points. I've been raising one for many, many years now about the schools that don't have breakfast club facilities. There are still some schools who don't provide the breakfast to those who mostly need it. And I've been told in the past that we're going to be looking at options of how you can feed those children, even if you can't house them in a breakfast club because you don't have sufficient staff. So I wondered what the update is on that, because if you've got children who are going hungry from the start of the day, then they're not going to be learning, their well-being is going to be significantly affected. And then secondly, with regards to split schools and the school environment, about the canteens and feeding children. I know that with Bryntegg School, you've got two split schools. When you're walking from Litchard or Coity into school, 40-minute walk in the torrential rain, and then you're walking back and forth sites, you're getting soaked. That's not going to do anything for the well-being or to allow children to be able to sit there and listen all day when they're soaking wet. So I think we need to look at these split old schools, but then again also the canteen facilities. And I've raised this at our last meeting, and I need to raise it again. There are children now who are being sent out into town which is a significant safeguarding risk because the schools don't have capacity to feed the children. So if you're in, for example, years 11, 12 and 13, you're being sent out to town to buy food because there's no room for you. But not only is it putting those children at risk, but also those who are on free school meals, well, you're highlighting to the rest of the school who's on free school meals because they're the ones sat in the canteen with the younger children. So I think we really need to be looking at this as a priority, feeding our children. And if we've got children who are being fed and who are happy and who are dry, then obviously their learning is going to be better, because I bet you there are children who don't go to school on when it's tipping down with rain, and that will affect attendance as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I think Helen would like to come in on this one.
Yes, I think as head teachers, we are responsible for the premises, and as much as standards and attendance and everything else. And all we can do is manage the facilities that we've been given. It's a bit like a landlord, isn't it? So I think it's really important that the staff in school manage the facilities they've got. So I'm in a similar position where I have one canteen. So as much as it's in the report as not the best practice to split lunch, we have to be able to house everybody. So I think it's really important. It's better to have a quality eating experience for 35 minutes where they can be seated and have a proper hot meal than it is to rush through that process. So as much as I'm halving the lunch time that they've got, I'm getting everybody through and everyone having a hot meal. So I think that's something that every one of us here accepts our responsibility to manage the facilities that we have and to be quite creative in our solutions for that, with obviously limited funds, etc. I just wanted to pick up on, and again, I am here, yes, to give you all the answers that you want, but also I think it's really important that I share with you one of the most fundamental things impacting on the well-being of my students. The national mission from Welsh Government is about achieving equity. And we, again, the expectation of school leaders is to implement achieving equity and closing that poverty gap in every single policy and every process that we implement. And you've referenced there, Councillor Williams, the fact that children walking from split sites get wet with a 40-minute walk. And the removal of the free school transport from my state pupils means I've got year 7 pupils walking 3 miles to school and 3 miles back. Significant impact on the increase. So I would argue that is very much a school environment that is outside of my control to a certain point. We've got increased private transport then, blocking terribly our drop-off point and access to the school, creating safeguarding issues on the roads. We've got a significant issue with the public transport infrastructure. So the bus that collects children from Caira, public transport, is full and is regularly driven past pupils waiting at the bus stop. So the next bus doesn't arrive in school until 20 to 10. So there's significant issues that I'm talking about equity. And whilst some schools will have challenges with split sites, with different provisions, every area has got its own challenges. And I think there are certain things that, well-being, the measure, if anybody could measure well-being, it would probably be attendance, wouldn't it? To say that children are happy in school, if it's the one thing that Welsh Government haven't quite worked out how to measure yet, but it's coming. And I think, that's having a significant impact on my stake school attendance. So I had to raise this today because this is very much something that I cannot manage my way out of or think creatively about. We do put on a bus at the end of the day to allow pupils to participate in extracurricular activities. Again, excellent for their well-being, best practice. But this is something that I wanted to raise, and just as something else that contributes to really affecting well-being. So I share your concerns around some of the physical issues we've got with the environment and age in schools and heat. We've got a terrible situation with beautifully designed school. I'm very lucky in my stag, but in the summer months, it's great if you're a tomato because the classrooms reach 40 degrees. So I've got to invest heavily in air conditioning systems to be able to allow pupils to learn effectively in those situations. So I think, as Lindsay would say, that we take on the responsibility for our buildings and really do try and creatively manage with what we've got, I suppose. So I hope that helps. And thank you for letting me air my concerns about the transport situation.
Thank you so much, Helen. Would you like to add anything, Councillor Brundle, Lindsay, at all to what Helen has said, or you content? No. Councillor Williams, you content with that?
Yeah, I'll pick up some things in our recommendations. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask a question now. It's based on Annex 2. Would that be appropriate, Chair?
Yes, you can do. I'm conscious of the fact that our officers and invitees need to leave soon, so...
It's
yep.
a quickie, but it is pertinent to the schools.
Okay, please do.
Recently, I've had access to a really, really well run wellbeing hub. It's been decorated beautifully. The people working there are really knowledgeable, and it really seems to have a good effect on the children. So I'm wondering what other schools are doing to provide this sort of wellbeing hub with qualified staff in it, please.
Thank you. Who would like to take that? Mike?
Thank you. Just to update on our sort of school perspective, we have a wellbeing and alternative provision hub, like very many schools do. Qualified staff supporting bespoke provision for children. So if we've got any modified timetables in place, children are able to attend, receive the required support. Within that facility, safeguarding wellbeing officers that will support staff and support children. Alongside of that, we've got the base for some of our more anxious and vulnerable children. We have our therapy dog that's housed there. We have a separate provision within this provision that will support additional curriculum as well. So it's almost like a catch-all learning, well-being, wider provision for children and staff. Within amongst that, we will also run our intervention. So we'll run a lot of our well-being, ELSA, wider well-being support, interventions from that facility. It is fair to say that provision is growing rapidly. I've invested quite a bit of time recently and money with additional staff to meet the needs of the children and to provide the support that's necessary here in school. And it is something which I think it's ever evolving in terms of how reactive we are to some of the provision that we're trying to put in place. But we like very many schools will have a wellbeing facility that supports not only the wider intervention that children are following, it's to support the curriculum aspect and the staff. And for that rolling intervention, we might have children that might access it for 1 hour a day, maybe 1 hour a week. Some might be there for 3 hours a day. Some children might have such a curriculum that's bespoke to them, and it's picking up on some of our earlier points, whereby they might have 1 or 2 days in the provision during their week to seek the required wellbeing support that they need before then accessing the main curriculum around the school site, just to break up that school day and support some of the wider wellbeing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Ashley, you'd like to add your perspective?
Yeah, very similar to Mike's provision. Really, we've got a wellbeing base. It's not all contained in one area. But we've got a wellbeing hub, and then we've got a progress centre as well. And in that progress centre is where the sort of bespoke timetables are delivered. Again, staffed by specialist staff. And similar to Mike, I think as schools, I think in the last 2 years, Archbishop, I know lots of other schools as well, we really have to invest heavily in the wellbeing support staff, as opposed to, well, in addition to the sort of academic curriculum staff. So it comes at a cost, but I don't think we've got an option at the moment with the needs we've got in schools.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Joanna, are you content with that?
Yeah, that's very reassuring. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. And now over to Councillor Evans, who I know has got a series of questions to finish the session.
Yeah, sorry guys, there's quite a few here. One is about the third sector, firstly, on page 62. I noticed that the third sector has a significant role to play in supporting the whole school approach. What I'd like to know is how often do these collaborations meet to discuss ways forward with schools? And also, what plans are there to increase and build effective working relationships across education, health and social care sectors to meet the wellbeing needs? Thank you.
Thank you. Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Chair. Certainly, and as it references on many occasions during the report, the value of the third sector and the role they play in this. If through you, Chair, and I call individual officers on this one, because I think it might be helpful, because all of the officers, in particular Mark Lewis in his world, deal extensively with the third sector, and especially some of the support they provide around non-maintained settings. So through you, Chair, Mark, if you can pick up from your world about involvement with third sector, please.
Thank you, Lindsay. Mark?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So there's a range of arrangements we have within my portfolio of family support. So if we talk about youth support services, in terms of supporting children who are not in my life, but potentially need, not in education, employment, training, there's work we do with the third sector around that area. So we commission through a youth support grant some monies to third sector organisations to support them then in us delivering that care plan for that pupil, that young person. So there's a range of arrangements there across youth support services. Happy to share that detail with the committee. As Lindsay's alluded to in terms of non-maintained settings, so we're talking about early years and childcare, that's very much a mixed economy in terms of preschool we're talking now. So again, rather than me labour the point now, I can share the range of providers there, the range of support we give those settings. I'll give one example now to the committee. So a bond, for example, which many members will be cited on. There's lots of work and support rather we've given that setting in terms of staff training, professional development and so forth. So I've probably got a list, and I'm conscious of people's time here, Chair, that I can share. I think in summary for me, third sector are key partners with us. We work with BAVO, which is Progenitor Association of Voluntary, so Progenitor Association of Voluntary Organisations, rather, umbrella organisation, to actually coordinate some of that as well. So there's a range of support in place, and again, happy to share both, the money maybe that the local authority uses to commission some of those services, and in addition, the support that officers and colleagues provide. So happy to provide a schedule.
Thanks, Mark. Given the time constraints, I think a note would be helpful on that. Thank you very much for offering that to us. Councillor Evans, you'd like to go back to you?
Yeah, that was brilliant, Mark. We would appreciate that report to look at. That'd be fabulous. Thank you. Also, I've got another question, page 64. It's referenced Together for Children and Young People programme. I noticed the objectives for the programme were set in 2021. We are now in the later half of 2023. So I'd want to know, have those objectives been reviewed? Were they achieved? When were they reviewed? And what was the outcome of the review? And what do the next set of objectives look like, please?
Thanks, Councillor Evans. I don't know whether that's a matter for Welsh Government again, Lindsay, and we can write to them and to seek their view. Is that your view as well? Yeah, Lindsay's nodding. Perhaps we can do that, Councillor Evans, because I think it's a Welsh Government-owned document, if with your permission. Do you have any other questions in your pack? I believe you had something to do with the case studies in the annexes.
Yeah, there was. It was on page 82. There were a number of schools who participated across Bridgend in the whole school approach and emotional mental well-being self-evaluation tool. On page 82, I can see they have, sorry, I don't know what that is. Okay. And on page 82, I can see there have been a considerable amount of interventions offered and given reference the self-evaluation. However, there are still no data against most schools in the completed and next step column. So why is there so little data given by those schools in that column? I also noticed that there is no progress column. So basically, for me, when I look at that report, it looks like certain schools are not doing anything. And I know that that is not the case. So, it would be interesting if there could be a progress column as well as a completed and next steps column.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. Lindsay?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with you, Councillor Evans. I'll pick that up with Joe and we'll make sure it goes in.
That's great. That's an easy one. Thank you very much, Lindsay. Councillor Evans, has that concluded your set of questions, or would you like to come back?
I think in the time restraints we've got, that's fine. That's lovely. Thank you.
Very kind of you. Thank you very much. We'll go to Councillor Tim Thomas now to discuss neurodevelopmental work streams, and we will almost be concluding then. You can bring in your question, Councillor Thomas, on treating English and Welsh in this with equality, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, first one, page 65 of the development framework, the Welsh Government document. Page 65, it looks at neurodevelopmental digital provision. Now, reading that, it looks like it's a tool to increase diagnostic capacity. That's really welcome. Parents that I've talked to, they've told me that it takes a considerable amount of time to get a diagnostics for neurodiverse conditions. But another thing that parents tell me is that as part of the diagnostic process, they often don't feel that their personal views are not taken as part of the process. So I'm just wondering, with these new systems in place, how do they take into consideration the views and the concerns of parents to feed into the overall diagnosis, I should say? That's the first question.
Okay, just as a rider to that, because it does pick up the same point on neurodevelopmental work streams. Samantha was on sorry, there's a bit of feedback. Samantha from our as a parent governor for Heronsbridge has had to leave us, but she's asked me to ask this question about the long process that it takes for diagnosis, which means that some students are forced to go into homeschooling. So, for example, it could take 2 to 3 years for autism to be diagnosed. She would like to express her concern about that and ask whether anything can be done about waiting times for diagnosis to ensure that some of these issues are tackled. So perhaps I can hand over to Catherine to pick up both Councillor Thomas's and my point on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Deep breath on this one. As a local authority, so for Bridgend currently, we are in discussions, but there are significant challenges because as of August the 1st, we've moved to Cwmtaf, and we are having a number of meetings with our health colleagues in Merthyr and RCT around how we move our Bridgend processes, which were underneath Port Talbot, into a Cwmtaf framework. And that is not an easy process. We have some of the best processes in Bridgend, and I know it doesn't feel like that for our families or for our Bridgend schools, but the data is showing that Bridgend has some of the shortest waiting lists, and they have the shortest waiting list across Cwmtaf. So we are really, really robustly fighting to maintain the best of the processes in Bridgend for our young people and for our families, to ensure that we aren't getting sucked into an even bigger waiting list, which are some of the proposals coming through the consultant and through the Cwmtaf. So we're really robustly trying to hold the line on this. And that is myself, our staff in the CART team who sit in the ND forums, our speech and language therapists, and our paediatricians who are really trying to hold this line. So that's a general sort of comment around some of the challenges that we are facing moving to Cwmtaf around ND. In terms of specifically to Councillor Thomas around the query about parental views, I sit on the multidisciplinary panel that diagnoses our young people with autism, and the parental voice is very strong. We triangulate all of the evidence, so the parental views that come through on all of the paperwork. So, you know, we have to have parent voice through checklists, through scoring, but also in person in the meetings that they have with our health colleagues. So it's very much a partnership. So I would be supportive of that at all points. So you know, there's no issue about losing the parental voice in the process. I've not been flagged up at all through health or through any of the meetings around a new digital process, so I'm interested in that one, and I'll keep an eye around that. Currently, our waiting times in Bridgend are around 18 months, but they can be quicker depending on as and when the information comes in. We're not holding a waiting list currently for a very specific type of assessment called ADOS, where some of our young people need an additional assessment. So processes are improving, timelines are coming down, and it whilst it feels like a long time, it is significantly shorter than in our neighbouring local authorities. And I've had a conversation today in an English authority where the waiting time for a diagnosis is 5 years. So, you know, it's unacceptable and it's not where we want to be. But at the moment, we are looking at pupils coming through to us in panel between 12 and 18 months. In Bridgend, every child who is put through to the ND pathway specifically around autism in early years is seen preschool, is seen before foundation phase if they're put through to the pathway. That's not the same in Merthyr and RCT, and they're going to move over to our processes to ensure that all of our most complex, our littlest young people have their diagnosis preschool so that they can make decisions. So I'm hoping that, you know, there were obviously some challenges over the last few years. The waiting lists have come down, and it has been acknowledged that the processes in Bridgend are working, and that's come from the consultant. So again, we're kind of pushing to ensure that we maintain the good progress that we've made. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much indeed, Catherine, for that comprehensive answer and encouraging answer as well. Councillor Thomas, you contend?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it sounds like there's challenges, but not as bad as some authorities. And I know this is a UK-wide problem and many parents go privately. But yeah, thanks for your response on that. It's very useful.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I ask members whether there are any final questions before we conclude this item?
Sorry, Chair, yeah.
Councillor Thomas?
I was just going to say on the provision between Welsh and English medium schools, looking at the progress made, just highlighting on the fact that in previous scrutiny sessions, I've always been a big supporter of the progress made on additional learning needs in the Welsh medium sector. Looking at some of the progress on well-being, it looks like most of the best, well, all of the best practice is within the English medium provision. I'm just wondering, what is this authority doing to make sure there's a level playing field in terms of emotional and well-being support between both the English and Welsh medium language schools?
Thanks very much, Councillor Thomas. Lindsay, can you take that one first?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Thomas. You know, I'm certainly with you on this one. I think it's vitally important that we got equity across all the settings. Clearly, I'll work with Joe to make sure that there are no discrepancies going forward on this. I know there's some excellent work, as you would appreciate, in all of our Welsh medium schools with regard to pupil and staff well-being, but I think it's important that we capture it effectively. Clearly, when we look at the Welsh Government document, there's lots of really good practice of Welsh medium practice in other local authorities, and I'd want to make sure that that's shared with our schools and vice versa, of course. I think that's very important. But certainly I'll pick that up with Joe and certainly with our heads, Councillor Thomas. I certainly agree with you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Just finally then we'll go to Councillor Amanda Williams, I believe, who wanted to pick up something on sharing best practice, and then we'll conclude this item.
Yes, sorry, it was on page 87, and it was just the notes on the report that said it listed some of the schools that had shared good practice, or that they said was good practice, and I just thought, for the benefit of the public, it needed something in it to clarify that it's not just those listed schools who are doing well and you know, the sentence makes out that it's just those schools have got good practice, and I just wanted clarification for the public that that's just simply those who have gone through the first stages, and that it's not excluding any schools at all.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Lindsay is nodding to me, but I'll pass over to him to confirm.
Absolutely, it's a really good point, Councillor Williams. I'll make sure, and I think that's a really important point generally, not just in this report, because when we identify good practice, you're right, it's not just these schools. We see good practice elsewhere, so I'll make sure that's amended and the narrative reflects that. Thanks, Councillor Williams.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Lindsay. Thank you all for a very productive and useful meeting. I'd like to particularly thank our head teacher invitees and our officers. So therefore, if there are no further questions, I'd like to thank you all, and you may leave the meeting so that we can discuss our conclusions and recommendations. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, members, I'm sorry that was a whistle-stop tour in the end to rush through some of the questions which we identified in our pre-meeting, but you would have gathered that I was coming under quite significant pressure to move things forward to ensure that officers and invitees could attend other meetings which they have to attend this afternoon. A very productive and useful meeting, I thought, with all the different invitees and officers, and we will now try and summarise that and come up with some conclusions and recommendations, and Lucy will have been able to capture it, I'm sure, in her usual style. So I'll pass on to Lucy to see what we've come up with.
Thank you, Chair. So there's been lots of discussion, excuse me, and questions here today, so I'll summarise some of the key points for the committee to make their conclusions and recommendations. So there was discussion around an analysis document of the work that's been uncovered, which we were informed is being done this term, and members had asked to have sight of that before the end of the year. There was also discussion on, I think it started with budget cuts. Lindsay had offered a breakdown of the Welsh Government grants which he could provide to the committee, and there was also an offer to supply a broader picture of grants and funding by Mark Lewis. And there was lots of discussion on the well-being of head teachers and what support there was available. One of the head teachers, Ashley Howes, had mentioned it being crucial that all adopted the sickness absence procedures. Sorry, bear with me a second. And there was also talk of the Shine project, checking in with staff and the voice of staff. And also the value and the experience of long-serving head teachers and leaders. There was conversation around governing bodies. The Cabinet member had mentioned the Bridgend Governors Association, which had started. And there was discussion about there not being enough governing bodies, or there were vacancies, and looking at how to attract people with the right skill set, and looking at that in more detail. And also looking at people in the communities to become governors and support the schools. So I think it was Councillor Jones said looking outside of the box, looking outside of the education community. Sorry, so the recruitment of support staff and school staff, doing more at a national level for recruitment. I believe the Cabinet member said Welsh Government, it was things they were looking into, and he said he would continue to raise it in the meetings that he had, but members may want to make that a recommendation to strengthen that going forward. Yes, of course.
Councillor Williams, would you like to come in?
Yeah, just on that point, I said in the meeting that perhaps we could do something as a committee as well, because it's coming up time and time again, and unless we've got everyone pushing for this, I don't think anything's going to be done, and we're going to end up with no support staff in our schools, and these are extremely highly qualified and well thought of support staff who are leaving to work in supermarkets and things. So
yeah, thanks, Councillor Williams.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can recommend that we as a committee write to the Welsh Government to add weight to what the Cabinet member is doing behind the scenes, so that we can have a record of that particular recommendation to ensure that these kinds of careers are incentivised. I think that would probably be an appropriate way forward given our discussion today. Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins, please.
Just to say, Alex, I have to attend another meeting now. Is that okay?
No problem. Thank you very much for your helpful contributions today.
All right, thank you. Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so moving on, Lucy, to other conclusions.
Thank you, Chair. So I know Councillor Evans asked about the review of the framework and did it take place and when and what were the outcomes. So we can pose that question to Joanne Bendon to respond. And there was lots of discussion about the curriculum from Wales and homeschooling and the children going back into education later on. And I believe that the corporate director said that the document had been published for home education guidance, and once he had gone through that, he'd be happy to come back and give a summary. There was also an offer from Mark Lewis with discussion on the third sector supports for the whole school approach. He said he was happy to share a range of providers and schedules which could be supplied to the committee. I think again, Councillor Evans, there was a question on the objectives being achieved and what the next objectives looked like, which we can put forward again to Joanne Bendon. And then also the data that had been given by the schools, and the corporate director agreed with there not being a progress column or a next steps column, which he said he would pick up with Joanne Bendon. One second. Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll pass back to members to make any conclusions and recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Thanks very much. A couple of things that I picked up on recommendations is we'd have a breakdown of the grant funding from page 5 and 6 of the report. Again, then that we'd take on as well about the support staff, about the Welsh Government, and they still haven't completed their review of home to school transport, and whether we could put pressure on them as well as to find out when we would get a decision on that. I'd also like to see an update provided to this committee with regards to those schools who still don't have a breakfast club, and a plan going forward, given the cost of living crisis, and we're going into winter, as to what they're going to do to feed those children, to ensure that they're getting a breakfast before school. And then finally, I'll pick up the rest of it in our forward work programme with regards to catering and everything like that. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor Williams. I think the majority of those things had already been captured, Lucy, but I'm sure that that's been recorded now, Councillor Williams. Thank you very much. Councillor Jones.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of things for me. One, this analysis document on the back of the self-evaluation process of all schools. I think we should really pin our colours to the mast here and say we need to see this analysis document as soon as conceivably possible, because of course this not only will assist us in terms of budget setting, but it will also give us an indication as to how, as a one council approach, we can utilise the services of our social services and wellbeing directorate. So I think that's important. And more importantly as well is that it will be reasonable for this scrutiny committee to expect 100% take up from this from all schools and colleges in the county borough. There shouldn't be any reasons why, and if there is a reason why, then we obviously will be concerned about that. But 100% take up, because I think this is a unique opportunity for us to actually a deep dive into what is actually happening with children and young people across the county borough. Secondly, I think we should completely refresh where we are with governors. We need to look at where we are, where we need to be, and I have a view that the current systems in place do not support the recruitment and retention of school governors. We need to take a fresh look and how we can capture the very best in our communities who can support our schools. The other thing as well is I was particularly concerned about the comment made by Helen Jones, the head from my stake, who spoke quite openly, I thought, about the difficulties on the recruitment and retention of school staff. And I think this is something which the council should consider putting on our corporate risk register. It's not only in relation to recruitment and retention, it's about what current support mechanisms are in place for our staff. Because what I was picking up from that particular delivery was this is the thin edge of the wedge in relation to what we're now experiencing with social services support. We don't want to find ourselves in the same situation as we do with our social workers, where we clearly have problems with recruiting and retraining experienced and qualified people to deal with social care. And finally, from me, Chair, we spoke a lot this morning, but we didn't actually speak a lot about family engagement, parental responsibilities. And I was going to come in at the end, but the meeting has gone on far too long for that. But I think we should be looking in this analytical document that we're having back, evidence of supporting parents and how parents can play a key role in the well-being of children in our school. And then finally, I think it's always good to have school heads in a meeting like this. You learn so much as to what is actually happening at the coalface of education. So perhaps as a consideration for us as a committee, at least twice a year, we have this opportunity to speak with heads and to give the heads the opportunity to engage with members as well. So we get a better feel basically to what is happening at the coalface of education. And I think the coalface of education is very, very important. Thank you all, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones, for those insightful conclusions and recommendations. I believe and I hope that the committee would agree that we ask for that analysis by the time we consider the midterm financial strategy, if not before, and that will take place in January. So I think we should urge them to provide that analysis so that we can consider that in our conclusions and recommendations on the Education and Family Support Directorate. As far as I can gather, I think in spite of the fact that the data suggested that 81% of schools, or primary schools rather, hadn't taken the opportunity to scope scope and action plan for the framework. I think she mentioned that 100% had now joined that process. So I think that satisfied that one. With regards to governors and the retention of school staff, I fully support that. We need to incentivise governors with the correct skills. I think we should conduct an audit of skills of different governors so that we have the appropriate skills to be able to govern our schools. I fully support that, Councillor Jones, and your comments about supporting parents and ensuring that we invite head teachers to regular meetings of this committee, I think should also be recorded and be formal recommendations from this meeting. So thank you very much for your contribution. Councillor Winstanley, please.
Okay, I just wanted to pick up on the mention of the Bridgend Governors Association. Many of us in are governors, and I've heard of the Bridgend Governors Association, but I don't recall getting an invitation to a meeting tonight. So I don't know if that's the case across the board or whether it was just me, but it would be worth us checking how it's advertised and how are governors informed of those sorts of networks.
Okay, can we ensure that we just write to the Bridgend Governors Association to ensure that they have all of local authority governors and community governors on their circulation list, and everyone is made aware of their activities? I think that would be appropriate, so that everyone's aware of what's going on with them and how they can support governors in their roles. If that's okay, Councillor Winstanley. And Councillor Williams, please.
Just to go back to the governor's thing, I wasn't aware that there was a meeting tonight. I can't attend because I have an actual governing body meeting this evening instead. But going on from what Councillor Martin Jones said about an audit of governors, I think could we potentially as a committee or a small group of us look at those schools that have significantly failed to recruit? Say fail, it's not their fault, but those ones where we are finding that we've got larger gaps, and what we can do and why those schools are presenting each month with because I'm sure they'd be struggling to be quorate on a lot of committees as well, particularly if you've got people who are off. So I wondered if we could look at that, even if it's a small group of us, and try and help in any way with the directorate. Thanks.
Sure, Councillor Williams, I don't see why not. Whether we can set up a working group or perhaps include it on our forward work programme at some point. I'm aware that you've raised governance as an issue, a potential issue for discussion on our forward work programme. Potentially, it wouldn't necessarily need to be a big substantive item, but we can certainly consider it. And perhaps I can liaise with the scrutiny team to assess how we best go about doing that. But no, your comments are well made, and we'll ensure.
Yeah, so maybe we could just go away a small group and look at it all, and then present it to the committee at a later date as part of a
So we'll consider that working group alongside the scrutiny team to see whether that's viable or not. Councillor Evans, please.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, it's just about the governing meetings. Actually, I believe that an email was sent on the 4th of the 7th, 23. Now, I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly who it was sent by, but what it was exactly the way, same ethos as how the LDP year-end sessions were taking place, and I made a point of actually putting that date in my diary because they sent us an email with all the different governor trainings. There's even up to 2024 as well. So if you haven't, I'll have to look into my folder, but I know that on the 4th of the 7th, 23, an email was sent regarding all the training sessions. Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Oh, that's useful, Councillor Evans, and perhaps we can ensure that that email is recirculated if people have misplaced that information. So that's great. Thank you very much. Are there any other conclusions and recommendations which members need to bring to our attention which haven't been mentioned thus far? I can't see anyone indicating, so thank you very much, Lucy, for taking us through those conclusions and recommendations of what has been a 3 1/4 hour meeting. Thank you for succinctly doing that. So we now move to item 5, and that's our forward work programme. And I'll ask Lucy to take us through this. And there have been some amendments since the paper has been published. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. So following on from members' consideration of the forward work programme at the previous meeting, the forward work programme for this committee is attached as Appendix A. The SOC forward work programmes will be included in the next report to COSC with any updates for each SOC meeting included. The recommendations monitoring action sheet is attached as Appendix B to the track responses to the committee's recommendations at the previous meetings. I'll hand back to the Chair for any questions from members.
Thank you very much indeed, Lucy. So members will have seen the suggestions for our future work programme, and I need to alert members to change which has come to my attention earlier on today, and that is the proposal to move the discussion of additional learning needs provision due to staff sickness here at the local authority to a later date, potentially in the spring of next year. That will assist the directorate, and I'm told by the corporate director that it isn't necessarily time sensitive to consider that particular item at this stage. So he would be content, if we are, for that to be moved. It is been suggested then for us to look at catering services and school modernisation as a potential replacement item for that. And I know that Councillor Williams has certainly expressed an interest in looking at that at the earliest possible opportunity. So that is a suggestion from us. Then, of course, we've got the Adult Community Learning Information Report, which won't necessarily be that much of a substantive item to go alongside that report on catering services. The scrutiny team are also going to look at potential visits to primary schools and secondary schools so that we can look at what catering services they provide and what gaps in provision there are, so that we can have a full discussion on and a full understanding of exactly what issues they're facing. Then, of course, we have the draft medium-term financial strategy, as always, in our January meeting, and the budget proposals. And as Councillor Jones noted, it would be useful to have the analysis in readiness for that meeting. And then moving towards the end of the municipal year then, but this is subject to change, we have proposed an update on how the curriculum for Wales has been rolled out within the local authority since it's started, since it was statutorily rolled out in September of this year, and an update on the Welsh and Education Strategic Plan. But it may be the case that we look at ALM provision then, depending on what members think. But I'll defer to members now on what they believe should be on our forward work programme, and go to Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks very much. I obviously want to raise about catering services, breakfast clubs. There's something I get a query every couple of weeks. Why isn't there a breakfast club, for example, in Coedy Primary? And I know it's one of several schools that hasn't got that provision to provide some food for children. So I'd like to see that. And also I raise catering services outside of the free school meals, because this is also our comprehensive schools. Some of our comprehensive schools, I know Bryn Teg now is at capacity for the first time in a long time with pupils, and they don't have, despite having 2 halls, they don't have capacity to feed everyone. So it's extremely difficult, and I think there are children who are going without food or don't want to queue up for the small time that they have to queue up, because there are so many children going at one time. Yes, in smaller schools you can stagger your days, but when you've got so many children in a school, I think there's 340 odd year 7 children alone in Bryn Teg, when they're all queuing to have their food. It's very difficult to get all those through in that short period of time. And also, I have a duty to push this forward, because I took a group of Coedy Primary children at the beginning of the year into the council chamber, where they debated with Councillor Jones, who was mayor at the time. He oversaw a debate on the quality of the food and the portion sizes in primary school, where you've got nursery children wasting a lot of food and the older children going home hungry, and that's all impacting on well-being. So I think we need to look at this as soon as possible, because the children have raised it, and we've just spent 3.5 hours talking about well-being and pupil voice. And when the pupils, fair play, put themselves forward and come into our council chamber, I think we have a duty to push this through as soon as possible for them, to make sure that they aren't going hungry, because the longer we leave this, the more hungry they will be getting. And I also said that I invited, I think at the last meeting, the invites went out there for Coedy and Bryn Teg. I'm more than willing to invite members of this panel for lunch to see the concerns. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor Williams. I know the scrutiny team will investigate with the directorate on which schools we ought to visit to look at their services, but that's a very kind offer. We're just keen on not overwhelming the children when we come en masse. So it may be the case that individual councillors have to look at going to their local school, but the scrutiny team will liaise with the directorate on that and ensure that we have all of the information to hand so that we can make some considered decisions at our next meeting. Are members content that we look at that, given Councillor Williams' suggestion that it should be looked at quite urgently on December the 4th, or do other members have any other suggestions? Councillor Evans, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I do. I think I actually would second what has been said about the children with regards to their well-being and how things are being managed in the catering amongst schools. I do think that it's not consistent throughout, because I will share in a school that I've been a governor. I've had a meal, and it's, the meal, I was quite happy myself with that meal. However, so I don't think it's consistent, but we need to be consistent as a borough. So I would really recommend that we press for a meeting urgently on this. And after all, as I said, under the children now, they are included in the Equalities Act and they have a voice. And under Article 12, children do have the right to say what they think should happen when adults are making decisions. And I think on that note, that is how we press on. And I'd be encouraging people to, the team, to be actually looking at getting this on the agenda sooner than December. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. We don't have a meeting before December, so our next meeting is December the 4th. So hopefully we can receive a report at that time, given the fact that both Councillor Williams and you have proposed and seconded that to go on the agenda. Is
there not an opportunity for an extraordinary meeting, or can we call an extra meeting? I'm just wondering and putting it out there.
I think it may be the case that we'll be up against time constraints on first of all, allowing officers to put the report together within 6 weeks, and of course for us to take the opportunity to visit schools. However, I'm happy to defer to other members, but I don't believe there'll be time within our timetable. I'm looking at Lucy as our scrutiny officer, and she's shaking her head about whether we can put in another meeting within the diary. But I'm happy to take members' views and report it back to the scrutiny team. Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm more than happy to support my fellow members on this issue. And perhaps we could put it under the emotional, mental well-being and welfare agenda, rather than just focus entirely on the catering aspect of it, because I think there are other aspects as well. It's not only catering. I think it's what sort of welfare support are we putting in place for children and young people in schools. For example, again, going back to Helen Jones, she gives some good examples of what they're doing in terms of a learning environment in a youth club setting. So there is a big issue here in relation to well-being of our children and young people. If we there is a danger, I think, if we just focus on the catering aspect of it, we may lose sight of other aspects in terms of the wider issues of welfare support for children. And I think under that title, Chair, we'd be more than justified to try and expedite and put this forward sooner rather than later, because again, on the back of today's meeting, members are being advised that there are issues out there in our schools. And of course, we need to remind ourselves it's our role to scrutinise, to just reassure, to just be satisfied that across all schools and colleges in the county borough, this sort of support is in place. It's not our role basically to take on operational responsibility, but to reassure us and to scrutinise, and of course to be the public voice in the scrutiny process, and I think that's important. But yes, as I say, I support both members, but I would just add that we put it under this emotional, mental and well-being and welfare support sort of agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. And we want to try and move towards that kind of approach anyway, in aligning it to our corporate objectives. So potentially that instead of just examining one issue in its particular silo, it's about looking at perhaps more vulnerable children in a more general sense. So yeah, I understand your approach on that, but I still I'm sceptical of whether operationally we can bring the meeting forward from that date to allow officers to put together a comprehensive report on the current situation, and of course allow us the opportunity to visit some of the schools in question. So I would suggest that we stick to December the 4th, because that is already in our diaries, it's already in officers' diaries, and they'll have time then over the next 6 weeks to draft that report. But I don't underestimate the urgency in which we have to look at this issue. So I hope that's a reasonable compromise. Okay, would any other members like to contribute on our forward work programme? Councillor, did you want to say anything extra?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that if we're doing this, it would be nice to invite some pupils to give their voice at the next Scrutiny Committee meeting. But also, if we're going down that line, then we've discussed today as well about the access to outdoor play and everything like that. If we're looking at their well-being, not just the facilities then for the catering, what about their outdoor play? Because there are some schools who don't have a sports pitch or any grass. So maybe, and then that's where it would be reasonable, because you wouldn't be able to do a full report before December if we're looking at a number of different areas of it. And when we're visiting, we can see there's good practice, there's schools and there are children who are losing out on other aspects as well. Thanks.
Yeah, good point, Councillor Williams, and that supports Councillor Jones's view then, doesn't it? Looking at it more holistically rather than just solely catering services, looking outdoor play as well. And yeah, perhaps we can record that, Lucy, and see if we can incorporate that in a more of a holistic paper on well-being and the services which schools offer. Is there anything else that members would like to add before we conclude this particular item on our agenda? Can't see anyone indicating, so therefore we move to item 6, and that's urgent items. There are no urgent items of business in respect to which notice has been given in accordance with Part 4, Paragraph 4 of the Council Procedure Rules. So I thank all members and invitees for attending of what's been a productive meeting, and I hope you have a good afternoon. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks all.